Do you think you've become some kind of superhero? Emerging from the shadows, Chris sneered as he looked down on us, flustered. Beside me, Sherry, surrounded by 5 gang members, was trembling in fear. The leader of gang encircling Sherry and me was Trevor. Breathing heavily, Trevor was loudly laying down the law. However, the moment he heard my name, Trevor suddenly changed his demeanor. Confused by Trevor's unexpected reaction, Chris raised his voice, attempting to incite an attack on us. But irritated by Chris, Trevor turned his back on us and glared at Chris, who was arrogantly standing behind. Unaware of my relationship with Trevor, Chris must have thought he could use the gang to harass me. And because of this, Chris, who had overstepped his bounds, ended up cornering himself into a dire situation. My name is David. This year, at 36, I have a somewhat unusual background. During my student years, convinced I had no allies, I clashed with others daily. Though sometimes mocked for my height, no one could match up to me, the strongest. Of course, I've had some trouble with the law. Only the police officer, Kevin, genuinely worried about me. You need to be kinder to people now that you're an adult. Kevin always looked out for me, calming me down whenever I caused trouble. It was Kevin who introduced me to the military, a path I had never considered during my uncertain future. After enlisting, confident in my physical abilities, I was recognized by my superiors and underwent special training and various experiences. Reevaluating my life, I worked hard to study, something I had never done before, hoping to be of some use to others. Years later, having risen to a position where I was in charge of a unit, I was assigned to a special forces team. Longing for a normal life after completing numerous missions, I retired from the special forces and took a job at a regular company. The company I joined was a small foreign trade firm, dealing directly with international transactions and mainly mediating between companies. Occasionally, I have to deal with individuals who can show their faces in broad daylight, which is why Mr. Thompson, president of my company, knowing my background, hired me also as a bodyguard. Never a fan of formalities, I found the daily routine of wearing a suit and working on a computer ill-suited to me. Yet, this mundane daily life felt fulfilling in its own way. I had no complaints about my job, except for one unbearable aspect. It was Chris, my younger, taller boss. Boasting about his prestigious university degree, he looked down on me as a high school graduate from the lower ranks. Chris's attitude was infuriating. Hey, you're a high school grad, right? It's amazing you got into this company, and at your age, it must have been your first job, huh? Must have been living a worthless life until now, right? Indeed, I am a high school graduate. But having served in the military and special forces, I pride myself on a rich life experience that is unmatched. Enduring Chris's endless and impressive college tales is an unbearable torment. Not going to college definitely means you've missed out on life, but I guess someone who's only experienced the bottom of the barrel like you can't even imagine that. I couldn't accept that such a worthless man was managing a team as a boss. Sherry, my direct supervisor and the senior manager, always laughed off Chris's pompous behavior and irritation towards me. Don't worry about it. We just need to do our job. Feeling a familiar kindness in Sherry, I was surprised to find she was the daughter of my mentor, Kevin. While talking about Kevin, Chris, looking displeased, slammed my desk hard. Having fun with my Sherry, even though you're just a high school grad, you are 10 years too early for that. An irritated Chris dumped a mountain of work on me and left. Then, Sherry looked at me worriedly. Is this okay? It's a lot, but compared to the operations in the special forces, this is nothing. Handling paperwork is not a big deal. However, having spent over a decade in the isolated world of special forces, I lacked the manners and rules of a civilian. Without Sherry's support, I couldn't even properly set up meetings for outside sales. Sherry, though higher in position, is much younger in age. Her gestures of gently calming me, so obviously reminiscent of a parent-child relationship, felt nostalgically familiar. And every time Sherry joined me on outside visits, Chris would glare at me with jealous rage, grinding his teeth. It was obvious to anyone who saw it, Chris had set his sights on Sherry. Indeed, Sherry, with her beautiful looks and bright personality, was well regarded by the staff and an incredibly attractive woman. Sherry, uncomfortable with his advances, tried to keep her distance, but Chris, undeterred, would seize any opportunity to approach her and invite it. "Sherry, I found a great place. Let's go out for dinner, just the two of us tonight." Unable to bear it any longer, I grabbed Chris's hand as he attempted to touch a distressed Sherry. "Ouch, what are you doing? Can't you see Sherry is troubled? And lately, touching a woman without consent is a big issue, isn't it? Do you even know who you're talking to? Unlike bottom-ring employees like you, I'm a manager." Chris boasted arrogantly, as if his position as a manager justified his behavior. To me, it didn't matter what position he held. Sherry was the daughter of my mentor, and if she was in trouble, it was only right to help her. Chris tried to shake off my hand and landed a strong punch to my stomach, but such an attack hardly made an impact on my trained body. I feigned pain to appease him, and Chris sneered at me triumphantly. "Humph, I'll let it go for today. Just don't ever get in the way of me and Sherry." He left in a good mood that time. But to protect Sherry, I continued to interfere with Chris's tyranny time and again. Then, one day, I was suddenly summoned by the department head, Alex. It seemed Chris had been feeding Alex all sorts of stories. Although I couldn't agree with being reprimanded, I kept apologizing. Unlike Sherry, who came to console me after the lecture, Chris came to gloat. "After all, a useless person like you is just dead weight to the company. Just quit already." Causing trouble here would only burden Sherry and Mr. Thompson, who had hired me. As much as I wanted to retaliate, I had no choice but to let Chris's insults slide. However, as I continued to intervene to keep Chris away from Sherry, my desk began to pile up with work he dumped on me daily. The volume of work kept increasing over time, and soon I was buried in so much busy work that I couldn't even make the last train home, let alone leave on time. "I'm making a useful employee out of a bottom rung like you. Be grateful." Sherry, worried about me, offered her help, but before we knew it, it was past midnight. Seeing the time, Sherry suddenly smiled at me. "It's too late now, can't be helped. Let's grab some dinner and then take a taxi home." I couldn't refuse Sherry's invitation, nor could I let her go home alone. "All right, as a thank you for helping me with the work, dinner's on me tonight." Sherry's childlike expression of joy, a stark contrast to her usual beauty, felt incredibly endearing. The pleasant time flew by quickly, and I left Sherry in front of the restaurant to look for a taxi on the main street. Just as a taxi pulled up, I heard Sherry scream. Rushing back, I found Sherry surrounded by 5 large men. "What are you guys doing?" "We'll deal with the guy later. Miss, would you come with us?" As I brushed off the man's hand that was grabbing Sherry, he glared at me with a demonic expression. "Hey, who do you think you are? Don't you know me? I'm Trevor, the gang leader around here." The gang Trevor claimed to be a part of was one that Mr. Thompson had warned me about. And Trevor was their young leader. His large build and sharp eyes would make any ordinary person want to flee immediately. But no matter who the opponent was, I couldn't back down. "It doesn't matter who you are. If you lay a hand on her, I won't hold back." Facing Trevor's ire, his fist flew towards me with resolve. I thought I could handle the attack, but it was tough to bear after several hits. Seizing a moment's gap, I grabbed Sherry's hand, attempting to escape from the situation. But there were 5 of them. They weren't going to let us escape that easily. Cut off from any escape, I was deflecting the attacks from Trevor and his gang when a familiar voice echoed from the shadows of a building. "What are you doing? Hurry up and finish him off." Emerging from hiding was none other than Chris. Standing before us, Chris arrogantly started spouting selfish remarks. "Hey, you think you're some kind of hero? You're no match for Trevor and his crew. Stay away from my Sherry." Chris, convinced of his absolute superiority, looked down on me with a smug grin. Facing 5 opponents, I had no way out, and even I couldn't protect Sherry under these circumstances. Sherry, paralyzed with fear, trembled and couldn't move. In this dire situation, I racked my brain for a solution but came up empty, falling right into Chris's trap. However, upon closer inspection, Trevor's face looked familiar. Wondering if it could be him, I introduced myself. "Could you be Trevor?" "I am Trevor. What do you mean by could you be? Do you think you'll be allowed to act like that?" Irritated by my words, Trevor frowned and glared at me condescendingly. "Do you recognize me? I'm David." Right after I introduced myself, Trevor's eyes widened and his face turned pale. Then, in a panic, Trevor started apologizing profusely, despite being in the middle of the road. "Wait, you're David. I'm terribly sorry for my ignorance and disrespect. Hey, you all apologize too, now." Shaken by Trevor's sudden erratic behavior, the rest of the group hastily apologized to me. Sherry, stunned by Trevor's bizarre actions, managed to stop trembling from the shock. And above Chris's astonished face floated numerous question marks. "David, what on earth are you?" Dumbfounded by Trevor's repeated apologies, Sherry looked back and forth between me and Trevor. Losing patience with Trevor and his crew's inexplicable fear, Chris started yelling and berating them. "Trevor, what are you doing? Hurry up and teach this guy a lesson." "Shut up. Do you even know who this man is? David here used to lead the gang that ran this area, and I owe him a lot. Someone like you has no right to speak lightly of him." Before meeting Kevin, I used to vent my frustrations and cause trouble, and that's when I met Trevor. Trevor suddenly came to me, who was undefeated at the time, wanting to be my disciple. Initially reluctant, I eventually started taking care of Trevor, who would always follow me around. This odd relationship with Trevor somewhat changed something in me. I never expected to reunite in such a manner. Trevor kept apologizing to me. Confused by Trevor's turnabout, Chris still ordered them to attack me and Sherry. "Who cares about the past? You said you'd listen to me, so do it now." Despite Chris's harsh words, Trevor defiantly glared back at him. Unable to comprehend Trevor's actions, Chris looked flustered, absent-mindedly scratching his head. Suddenly stopping, he pulled something from his jacket's inner pocket. Holding something shiny and sharp, Chris screamed and lunged at me. Easily dodging Chris's attack, I grabbed his hand and knocked the dangerous object to the ground. "What are you even doing? Stay away from my Sherry. Trevor, you're useless to me." Enraged and turning red, Chris hurled insults at Trevor and his crew. But Trevor and his crew remained unfazed by Chris's words. Letting go of his arm, Chris stumbled and fell to the ground. Getting up while grimacing, Chris glared at me fiercely. "Remember this, you'll pay for defying me, the manager." Looking around in panic, Chris continued to loudly insult me and Trevor's crew. Then, holding his arm in pain, he fled the scene. Sherry, having witnessed everything, looked at me with a face that couldn't hide her astonishment. I didn't want Sherry to know, but in this situation, I had no choice but to explain. Taking a deep breath, I slowly shared my past with Sherry. Truth be told, I didn't always live a life I could be proud of in the past. It was during such times that I met your father. As I shared the story of how I met Kevin, Sherry's face lit up with understanding and relief. Confused by her unexpected reaction, Sherry began to speak with a joyful smile. "So it was you. I heard stories from my father, and I'm glad to see you're just as kind and straightforward as I imagined." It seems Sherry had heard about me directly from Kevin himself. Despite the trouble I had caused, learning that Kevin had spoken fondly of me made me feel somewhat bashful. As Sherry and I shared this indescribable moment, Trevor approached apologetically. "David, I truly apologize for today. You've become a fine adult, different from before. I'm impressed all over again." Trevor's subordinates, confused by his reaction, kept their distance, watching the situation unfold. They must be wary of me, now a mysterious figure to whom Trevor has apologized. "David, let me make it up to you by driving you home, and please, miss, join us as well." Gratefully accepting Trevor's offer, I got into the car he guided us to. As I relaxed, thinking this was a moment to catch my breath, Sherry looked at me with sparkling eyes. "David, I don't know the details, but you were in some incredible places, weren't you? Do you have amazing muscles or something?" Even after retiring, I haven't skipped my daily training routines. With a body fat percentage of 5%, my physique, maintained through consistent training and exercise, even after my Special Forces days, is indeed extraordinary. Sherry's fascination with muscles seemed to erase any fear she had from being attacked earlier. Though the conversation took an unexpected turn, I was relieved to see Sherry's spirits lifted. After ensuring Sherry's safe return home, Trevor also drove me to my place. As we were about to part ways, Trevor stepped out of the car to speak to me. "David, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. And about that Chris, it seems he holds quite a grudge against you." The information Trevor shared about Chris was astonishing. But now, I had proof that Chris couldn't boast about being a manager anymore. The next day, I was greeted by a visibly irate Chris as I arrived at work. Immediately upon seeing me, he grabbed my suit and looked down at me with a glare. Chris began to boast about his past, as if trying to intimidate me. "Yesterday was just a mistake, right? I mean, I was part of a bad gang back in high school. There's no way I'd be scared of someone like you." It seems Chris met Trevor through a senior's introduction during their college years, but from the way Chris refers to him, they don't seem to be on equal footing. More likely, Chris was somewhat of an underling to Trevor. Despite this, Chris boasts about having Trevor as his protector, looking down on me with a complacent smile. Fed up with Chris's attitude, I shrugged off his grip and made a call, leaving my phone on speaker. "Trevor, are you available right now?" "Yes, always happy to hear from you, David." Chris, taken aback by Trevor's unusual tone, froze with wide eyes. He hadn't expected me to call Trevor. Ignoring the stunned Chris, I continued the conversation. "About what happened yesterday, that was all true, right?" "Yes, Chris was the one who paid us to attack you and your friends. His reckless behavior, pretending to be a gang leader, has been quite a nuisance." Chris, panicked by Trevor's statement, tried to end the call immediately, but several employees had already arrived at the office. He found himself under the cold, disdainful gazes of those around him. "This is a lie. I don't know anything about this. David must be forcing him to say these things." As Trevor continued to expose Chris's actions, Chris turned pale, covered his ears, and collapsed to his knees. Trevor was furious at being called a liar, and he berated Chris over the phone. Upon hearing the commotion, Mr. Thompson appeared. After learning of Chris's misdeeds from nearby employees, Mr. Thompson sighed deeply and looked at Chris with disdain. "Chris, is this true?" "Well, this is, As Chris tried to mumble an excuse, Mr. Thompson pressed him for an answer. Resigned, Chris, his face gone from pale to white, apologized to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, looking weary, addressed Chris, who was barely able to voice his apology. "You're apologizing to the wrong person, aren't you?" I understand. David, I'm sorry." Chris, seemingly still not fully convinced he should apologize to me, swallowed his pride and offered an apology. Not only did Chris's scheme fall through, but he was also stripped of his managerial position on the spot by Mr. Thompson. Moreover, surprisingly, Chris was demoted all the way down to a regular employee, possibly due to Mr. Thompson's decisive action. Days after the apology incident, Chris, having finally realized his unwarranted behavior, completely stopped his unreasonable demands and arrogant attitude towards his juniors. However, for some reason, whenever Chris caught my eye, he would stop, back away, and flee. It was rare for Chris to initiate a conversation, but that day, he approached me with a nervous yet somehow smug expression, reminiscent of the old times. "David, you're a high school graduate, right? Can you speak French?" It seemed Chris had received a call from a client I was in charge of, who could only communicate in French. Chris probably assumed that, because I was a high school graduate, I wouldn't be able to handle communication or consultations in French. However, thanks to my diligent studies before joining the Special Forces, I could easily speak French, so there was no issue. After smoothly concluding the discussion with the client, the surrounding employees looked at me with admiration, leaving Chris dumbfounded. Speaking French was nothing out of the ordinary for someone with my Special Forces background, but it seemed to have taken everyone else by surprise. Isn't this normal? No. Did I do something strange again? For me, who had spent a significant amount of time abroad, such skills were to be expected. Apparently, Chris, who had always boasted about his education and acted superior, was known among the employees as an incompetent college graduate due to his lack of French proficiency. Indeed, Chris's attempt at speaking French over the phone was barely coherent. I managed to understand only that he desperately wanted me to take over the call. As my reputation significantly improved, Chris, once a manager and a college graduate, was now labeled useless, drawing disappointed looks. Employees who had once been looked down upon by Chris now chuckled at his complete loss of dignity. Humiliated, Chris returned to his desk, holding his head in his hands. From then on, cases requiring French communication were almost always directed to me. Although it happened occasionally, Chris would revert to his arrogant behavior towards juniors only when I wasn't around. However, no employee would listen to the commands of the inept former manager who couldn't speak French, and not a single person entertained Chris's demands or unreasonable requests anymore. One day, upon returning from an external visit, I caught Chris unsuccessfully hitting on a new female employee. This isn't what it looks like," she insisted, and I had no choice. "It's not my fault." Chris's excuses sounded nothing more than childish whining. Deeming his words unworthy of response, I whispered to him, "I'm still in touch with Trevor. That's why there haven't been any recent troubles with that group. Trevor and his subordinates have been keeping an eye on you, Chris." Chris collapsed on the spot, shaking slightly as he stared off into the distance, all strength drained from his body. Afterward, Chris stopped his arrogant behavior and, occasionally, was even seen praising others. He must have changed his heart and reformed his ways. Still, he continues to glance my way, gauging my reactions. Every time our eyes meet, his face contorts and he breaks into a cold sweat. Years have passed since I started working at this company, and although Sherry has since married and left, I was promoted to manager. And now, Chris is the chief. He has completely changed his ways and become considerate of those around him. Chris has become a dependable member of my team. Having met Kevin and seen people like Chris come to realize their mistakes, I've grown to believe that the world could be a better place if more people did the same. Having witnessed the darker side of humanity during my time in the Special Forces, my modest dream is for human conflicts to cease. It might seem naive for someone my age, but Kevin and Sherry always took my fanciful ideas seriously. I continue to maintain a friendly relationship with Kevin's family. While I may not be capable of much, if I can change even a few people's perspectives from looking down on others, I'll have made good use of my experiences.